Kind of, yeah. Thank you all for joining us on this early morning. We're going to be talking a little bit today about unlocking inclusivity, proven strategies for diverse and equitable recruitment. My name's Josh Davis. I'm an ER physician in a community practice in Wichita, Kansas. I'm going to let everyone here introduce themselves, and then we'll get going.
My name is Laura O. I'm from Emory University.
And my name is Josh Ellis. I'm from Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston.
I'm Ashley Winfield. I'm from Cook County in Chicago.
Anahita Kalantari. I am at Penn State Health Hershey Medical Center.
So we'd have no disclosures. We were actually just talking about how unfunded a lot of this work can be and uncompensated, so right on topic. Objectives today are going to be describe the importance of diversity in the emergency medicine workforce. Hopefully you leave here with some specific practices and strategies to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion in resident and faculty recruitment, and to be able to list 3 specific practices to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion for faculty retention as well. So we're going to give some specific strategies and stories that have been successful, as well as highlight some of our barriers. So we're going to go over some principles of DEI, we're going to give you some case examples, and then we're going to have a little bit about some of the barriers and change culture and ways to go about that. So diversity is the involvement of people with different perspectives, upbringings, and characteristics, just so we have an understanding of the different definitions that we're using. Equity involves the fair treatment for all people so that the norms, practices, and policies in place ensure identity is not predictive of opportunities or workplace outcomes. And then inclusivity is the culture of a workplace that refers to how the workforce experiences the workplace and the degree to which organizations embrace all the employees and enable them to make meaningful contributions. This image really kind of speaks to me about kind of what equity is versus equality and then kind of reality. I really, it kind of puts an image in my mind of kind of what our kind of goals are for and what we're kind of working towards here in terms of equity at least. And then the last principle that we sometimes talk about as well is justice, so that everyone has equal rights and equitable opportunities, so that justice is generally determined by the people in power, and it's kind of, we want to focus on equalizing the playing field and making it such that we have kind of a culture of change instead of blame and shame. So historically, medicine is a field dominated by white, cisgender, heterosexual males. And so we have a long history of that in medicine. Some examples, the first Black American to receive a medical degree was in 1837, was Dr. James McCune Smith. He had to go to Glasgow University in the UK to get his medical license because there were just racist admission practices at the US medical schools. In 1849, Elizabeth Blackwell was the first female physician to get a medical degree, and she got admitted to Geneva College as a joke, is kind of the history there. So they put it out to the male class to vote on it, and the class thought it was all a joke, so they all voted yes, and then she got admitted to medical school basically as a joke. And then in 1864, Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler was the first African-American woman to get a medical degree. One of the most striking things in reading about the history of medicine is how historically racist the American Medical Association was. So they actually purposely voted to exclude blacks and black physicians for many years, and then they actually deleted the documents out of the record after they voted on it to say that it never existed. They've since come to light and kind of apologized for that. So back then, belonging to the American Medical Association was a requirement to be a practicing physician, and so that was not just a political action group, kind of like it is now. It was actually a requirement. So that's where the National Medical Association kind of developed, and that was kind of mostly black physicians, and the state medical societies of black physicians kind of came together, and so that persisted, and there are many instances of documents that came out in the American Medical Association that have very disparaging terms. There were Jew peddlers was listed in some documents. Inbred Indian doctors should not be allowed to practice medicine. So that is kind of the history that we're coming from. By the end of the 19th century, there were 17 medical colleges for women in the US. In the 1890s, women made up as many as 30% of the graduates from medical schools. And then the Flexner Report came out and basically shut down all of the colleges that were allowed in both blacks and women. And it basically dropped the female and black representation in medical schools to less than 5%. And that has continued on. That's the structure that we're built from and we're trying to fight against. Today, we still have, diversity issues. So, for example, some of you may realize this, but from 2002 to 2017, Black, Hispanic, and Asian American applicants and matriculants of both sexes remain underrepresented. Just as an example, so 3% of Black faculty at medical schools are Black compared to 12% of the population. And then if you want to look at gender, women historically make 75 to 80 cents on the dollar across all ethnic groups compared to their male counterparts. And as of 2018, URM faculty had fewer publications, less likely to be promoted, less likely to be retained, and are less likely to have higher levels of promotion like chairs and national presentations. So why this matters, investing in diversity, equity, inclusion is obviously like the fair and right thing to do, but there's evidence in multiple domains that the benefit of DEI. So I think you're all probably aware of the business case for DEI, that more diverse teams are more successful. Fortune 500 companies that have more diverse teams have more profit. But I think the moral and the health outcomes are a little bit more striking to me. So disparities in medical care persist today. I think you've all seen many of these, for example, in pain control and access to health care, and a lot of things in health, the foundations of health like housing and education in the criminal justice system. But we do know that multiple studies over many decades have shown that racial and gender concordance improves many patient-centered health outcomes, patient experience, and mortality, and also, again, helps to address the systemic issues that are founded in the root of medicine. So, for example, one of the most recent studies in primary care showed that a 10% increase in Black physicians increased the life expectancy of Black patients by 30 days. So, increasing diversity in the workforce will help improve outcomes. But if we want to fix the system, we need diversity of thought along the academic and medical research pipeline. Again, combating the system and the way it's built. And this can only be accomplished by encouraging and empowering physicians from underrepresented groups to pursue and excel in medicine and academic medicine. So I'm going to hand this off to Dr. O to go over some of our great examples.
Good morning. So we're going to just talk about a few examples from our home institutions. So I'm from Emory University. Emory University has some natural advantages when trying to recruit for diversity. It's, we're a diverse city. There's a backdrop of MLK, civil rights movements. We have a longstanding affiliation with HBCU, Morehouse. And our faculty are very prominent in AWIM, ADIM. They're on the national scene. And a lot of them are content matter experts in the realm of diversity, equity, inclusion, and publish heavily in this space. So one recent paper tracked our metrics from 2006 and onwards, and since then we've had above the national norm in terms of percentage of women, African American, and URM residents, and we've been able to maintain that. Recently, I've had several national awards from the ACGME and SAEM highlighting how good a job we are doing with diversity, equity, inclusion. But I want to emphasize that we actually started from a place of non-diversity. So our program is 50 years old, and this was the Emory class of 1999, which was Philip Shane's first residency class. And he's one of our longest standing program directors who just recently stepped down from the program. So this was his first class. So out of a class of 16 people, 15 of them were men. And the one woman, her name was Mad Dog. That's what people called her. So much for that diversity. And then there was one African American man. So we did not start from a place of great diversity. And although Emory was very happy with the individual people they recruited in this picture, as a whole, there was some disappointment because we felt like we missed the mark completely. This started a very intentional effort to recruit for diversity at all levels, medical students, residents, and faculty. Had a visionary chair who brought in young faculty who at that time were not known, right? But were nurtured and fostered and retained within the Emory system until they became leaders in their respective areas. So like most programs, we feature residents very prominently in our recruitment process. Many of them make personalized videos that we have online, tagged to each kind of separate group. But for Emory's history, in the first 8 years, there's a heavy minority tax of like minority residents and faculty disproportionately volunteering or asked to volunteer for resident recruitment. But that minority tax was gladly paid because people believed that the program could become a diverse program. But it did take 8 hard years, right? We still currently recruit at SNMA, LMSA. We have a TOTIA, auntie uncle program, kind of like a big sis, little sis kind of program. And then we have also invested time into building pipelines. So this is the MUSE program. It's a medical student recruitment. So we start early, pairing URAM medical students with our faculty in the hopes that we can encourage them to stay on in our residency program. And then, so not everyone does stay, but we were lucky enough to recruit one from this MUSE pipeline this year. So several places offer now these DEI scholarships to come rotate at their home institutions. I heard that there were like over 100 now, but say your institution doesn't have the money to do that. So what can you do? You can piggyback onto your national organization state chapter. So Emory technically doesn't even have a DEI scholarship, but what it does, it has GSEP, and the Georgia College of Emergency Physicians. And that group is offering 3 $2,500 scholarships for any student who is willing to do an away EM rotation in the state of Georgia, because GSEP is recognizing that they have a problem with diversity in its EM workforce as a state chapter. And so if you're from a state that doesn't have a lot of diversity, you can lean in perhaps on a third-party organization to help you get the funds needed to help recruit in more diverse applicants. The other very powerful strategy for recruitment is actually community engagement. Just seeing faculty at the program get really involved in the community, it seems special, and it draws residents to your program. So so Dr. John Lewis is one of our faculty. He does an emergency medicine remix podcast, so he leverages arts and music and hip hop in order to get lay people to understand, basic things about health. And that's also opened up, speaking opportunities for him nationally. We are very clear that we do believe that there are systemic barriers that must be acknowledged. So this would be like a sample flyer of Black Men in White Coats, a film screening that Emory puts on. So we are acknowledging it, and then we're mitigating it in part through holistic review of applicants. So Emory has never had a cut score of standardized exams. We are very much engaged in holistic review. If there's some deficit in like the test score, we're looking for other areas where they're excelling, because Emory's program kind of embraces the philosophy that a higher test score doesn't necessarily bring anything to the program, right? So we are looking for other pillars of excellence. We're very public about our diversity metrics. We publish them online. And then we try to create a safe haven for respecting individuality. So if we recruit in people with tattoos and locks, we don't ask you to cover them up when you come, right? We like your diversity, so we want to keep your diversity, right? So this is a TikTok video that one of our faculty made, Trey Robinson. So this is what, on the left, what he wears normally. And he's just reminding people that sometimes doctors present atypically, right? And that just because this is what he likes to wear, he just wants to remind everyone that he's also a highly trained EM physician with specialty training in EMS, right, with enormous amounts of credibility. Fast forward to our class of 2024. This is our class of 19, so we have 9 women, significantly up from 1. None of them are named Mad Dog. 7 Black residents, 2 Asian residents, and our program's attitude is very much like we're proud of our success, but we also are very conscious that we have to maintain these things. So we're very humble. We don't automatically assume that we can rest on our laurels. We are always looking for ways to do better in terms of recruiting diversity, because we think it's a precious thing that needs to be protected.
Thank you so much for that. My name is Josh Ellis. I'm at Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital, and we really wanted to give you guys a couple perspectives from academic institutions and also different geographic locations and how that affected our recruitment process. I've been the director of diversity recruitment for our residency for 3 years now, and it was kind of a novel position created for me. We went from 0% URM that year they asked this position to come in. Now we're pulling 38% for the last 3 years. And then if your number is 13 applicants, it means you've recruited 2 or 3, and so it's not a bad statistic. But when I sat down and really had, one day you're a student or a kid, you think this is the way the world should be, and if I was ruling the world, this is what I would do. And suddenly you get a job title and a compensated role, and then they ask you to do it, and you're like, well, how do I do this? And the first thing I did was look at the literature and what are some examples that have shown how to diversify a program. And I read through all these and parsed through some of that data for you here. And most of them have similar concepts. And so one, I underlined compensated. They all talk about a role or a panel or having a major stakeholder in the academic and administrative part of it, but to have a compensated role such as me, I think it added, one, it's not a minority tax or a race ambassador. You're not taxing one of your coveted faculty members into this position. But two, I think it gives that person a lot of more power. I felt really empowered to do this job. I felt like it was my job to give. We went through a holistic review process, and part of that isn't just including people in your application that could come match at your residency, but we want every interview experience to have more applicants that are diverse. And so you're really reviewing more applications to increase your pool so everyone even in that pool feels more comfortable, not just the students who are coming in. And I'll cover how we went through that. And then every program essentially, not every, but quite a few of them are having paid, either paid visiting clerkship scholarships or paid second looks, and it's going to be really hard to compete. Our program is doing this if you're not offering money for these students to come a month and they're being offered money elsewhere. And then URM faculty engagement, I think that was a big part of my compensated role, to make sure I'm engaged, make sure I'm compensated for it. And then I highlight the diversity snowball effect. It's a paper, it's incredible, it's coming out of Highlands Emergency Program, and it really, diversity begets diversity, and the job has gotten a little easier now that we're pulling from a couple black students per class as opposed to 0% URM. So real quick on my role as Director of Diversity Recruitment, some of the responsibilities of that, especially if you're asking your job for an FTE buy down or what your actual role will be, this is something that was really helpful to be able to put it on paper. And on the admissions panel, so I reviewed every URM application, particularly those who wouldn't have made our interview process to begin with, and we looked for ways to holistically review their application to add points that maybe we missed. Gold Humanism Society, different type of award structures, especially if it's a popular voted award. If you had pass-fail grades, oftentimes that can skew your metrics. You're not knowing when you're getting honors, so we're having to parse through the clerkship evaluations to see, like, wait, the surgery clerkship really loved them, and this would have been an honors otherwise. I'm the assistant clerkship director as well, and so you have to have some engagement with those visiting clerkship students. You can't just have them come to your institution. And so every day I'm the face of the institution for them as their clerkship month, and then they come back for interview as the face of their experience there. On the interview panel, I had a very standardized interview process. Every underrepresented minority applicant interviewed through me, and they all got told about how great they are, how good their application is, and they really got to feel that they were special and that they could make something out of themselves in our program. But, and a couple other things such as rank list calls and reviewing the rank list with the program. I wanted a role in that rank list. If I was going to be recruiting, I wanted to be able to say, these students are actually coming and this is where we're going to have them. But I want to take a quick step back because I really sat at night staring at the ceiling thinking about what can I do here, what am I doing here, and why am I doing it? There's 276 programs in the match. There are not that many black applicants per year. There's definitely not that many black men. There's not that many Native Americans. And so whatever specific demographic you're hoping to get, if you're getting 2 or 3 of those, what program isn't getting one? And then secondly, I'd say Atlanta, Houston, Harvard, we're going to get ours. They're going to probably have an easier time recruiting than others. How many people are going to go to Iowa City, or I'll say Idaho, because they don't have a residency program and I won't pick on them? And how many black patients are in those cities? How many black kids are in those cities who don't get to see any emergency medicine doctor for the time they're there? And so I really had to think about, why am I asking somebody to come to our program if this is what the stake is? Is it geography? Is your family from here? Easy. If it's prestige, we have Harvard, that's nice, but Harvard's not famous for its emergency medicine program, right? It's famous for undergraduate institution. And then I had to really think about, like, if I'm recruiting, how am I doing it? Am I just saying you won't face discrimination here? You'll fit in, you'll feel comfortable? These are really low bar. Just telling you there's a lack of discrimination here is not a reason to come to my institution. And so I'd really ask myself, what am I asking people and what am I selling here? And I had to really believe that if you're coming here, you're going to be better off here professionally than you would have been if you didn't. And I quote, this is Dr. Freeman Hrabowski. He's a huge mentor of mine, I wish he would, I don't think he knows who I am, but I love this man. And so he's the president of University of Maryland, Baltimore College. He was the president during a tenure that has graduated more African-American PhDs than any other program in the country, including Howard, Meharry, and Morehouse. And so phenomenal. He came and gave our Martin Luther King Memorial Lecture at our institution, and his big quote, and this guy is bigger than life if you have the chance to look at his TED Talk, is science begets scientists. And this is not high expectations for our students, it's high expectations for ourselves. And I really honed in on what that meant, and it's that if you're coming here, I want all of our, and I brag about this in the interview process, is that all of our underrepresented minorities, we want to have them have a first author publication within their first 2 years. And that's higher standards than I put for everyone else, but not for them, for myself. So now I'm doing sickle cell research, I'm doing a systematic review on medical bias, I'm doing podcast work. And really, I think this is my theme, is that recruitment did not stop when they came into the door. I've been doing recruitment for these residents after the fact. They're going to be recruited into faculty through this engagement, and they're helping me recruit the next year's class by being so engaged. And so that's kind of been my spiel. We don't have the data that necessarily other programs might have, but I'm passionate about what I do. I'm excited, and I'm proud of it. And so that's my spiel. And so thank you.
Okay, so my name's, oh, we already did this. I don't know my name. So we're going to talk a little bit about the retention. And so we've highlighted a little bit some of the recruitment efforts. And then we're going to look at this now from the lens of faculty retention specifically, because as we know, as you see the ranks change every year, the numbers continue to drop off. We've all seen the articles. We've all seen Uche Blackstock's article and all the many about people fleeing academic medicine. I know I've thought about it a number of times, but I'm still here. So we'll kind of talk about some of those factors. This isn't going to be per se a case study like Emory's was. It's more so just sort of a review of the literature and understanding some of those barriers and some just basic strategies to deal with those. So you can't see this chart, don't even worry about it. It's summed up right here. So when you talk about why we're leaving, one part of that is the compensation process, right? So we know that the full cents on the dollar is the white man, and then we know every ethnic and racial for every ethnic and racial group, the female counterpart makes a few cents on the dollar. And then we know that the people who do worse tend to be Black and Latinx women and Indigenous American women are typically towards the lower end. And what that looks like overall is I earned $2 million less over the course of my career. And that's not just like liquid money, right? When you think about that $2 million, that's time that you can spend maybe cutting back to 50% to do other work. And so there's other opportunity costs and things that go into that. I'm not going to go through all of these, but just recognizing that from the moment I enter the door, I am undercompensated. It's not like overtime, I had kids, then I dropped to part-time. From the moment I enter, I am making less. And then even over the next 5 to 6 years of my career, I'm still making less. I do have leadership roles, but they tend to be less so than men, and they are more so in educational tracks. We're less likely to be chairs. And so we kind of come in, I don't want to say subservient, but we become some of the like roles that they think are cute, but don't really run the department is what I've been told about my simulation stuff. Anyway, so what all that leads to the end, right, is less likely to get grant funding, less likely to be associate professor, so on and so forth. And the reason I wanted to highlight that is because it's very difficult to be in an environment where you're undervalued, and that's part of why people leave. If I'm struggling and fighting just as hard as you, it's gonna, it's not gonna lead to me wanting to stay or feeling valued in that environment. So there are a few suggested practices. Salary audits and transparency. How many of you guys do a salary audit? Oh, nice. Look at y'all, man. That's very nice. So salary audits and transparency, and I'll highlight I'll just click through so we can get through so we have time to talk. Yale actually put forward a mechanism that they did. And so what they did was look at AAMC data to kind of create benchmarks based on your productivity, based on your rank, based on your years out of training or whatever it may be. And then what they did was they compared that across the board, and they adjusted people who had sort of fallen out of where they were supposed to be. And then not only did they do that and like whisper, hey, I bumped you up, they also held a town hall where they were open and public about the changes that were made. And so transparency goes a long way in terms of trust and promoting equity. Also equity in your promotion process and transparency. I'm gonna be quiet, I'm not gonna say too much, but it can sometimes, in some places, I know in a lot of places it's probably published, this is what you need to be an associate professor, but in some places it is not. And so you have people going up because you can only put so many people up a year, and there's not really any any transparency in that. We'll also say people aren't tracking who's being promoted. So that's sort of a clear strategy for the department, is to say, these are the trends, this is my staff, this is who's been promoted over the last 10 years, and then how do I then address this inequity in promotions process? And then also looking at your promotions process in terms of what you're promoting. So it may not be that women and other people of color are doing less, is that we don't value the type of community engagement work they do. Some of those things may be undervalued in your promotions process, and maybe that process needs to change. We'll skip a few things. And then mentorship and sponsorship is one I want to talk about. We have a ton of mentoring projects that you can go and find in the literature. They're all very different. One thing that I've seen in the business literature that works very well is pairing people with mentors from the beginning. So don't leave people to kind of flounder and look for someone. They send out surveys, they assess needs, what people are interested in, and then they pair them early on. And it's actually tracked. Are you meeting up with them monthly? Are you having a Zoom session here and there? And so there's actual accountability and tracking of the mentoring process, not just leaving people out. And they also do intentional development for their faculty to actually be mentors. And so I think, a lot of people like to wait for people who maybe or hope to have someone who's racially or gender concordant to mentor them, but that's not feasible in medicine. And so I think there's also benefit to mentoring or training faculty development for mentors so they can learn to mentor across cross-cultural lines, because it is a thing. I'm gonna leave that there. And then I talked a little bit about data and strategic planning, but plotting all of these things out and actually being intentional about it. We'll skip that. Very quickly about safety and belonging. So this was a study put out in 2022 by the AAMC about sexual harassment in the workplace. And this isn't like sexual harassment in the sense of like the more egregious touching or inappropriate sexual advances. This is comments being made about us or that are disparaging because you're a woman. So we didn't give you this opportunity because, you're a mom and you're having kids. Things like that. These were actually some of the quotes that were pulled from that. This actually happened to a friend of mine. Where do you think EM is? Top third, middle third, lower third in terms of specialty ranks? You can probably see it. We're the top. We're the top. It's us and anesthesia. We're pretty much tied around 52.6%. We are the worst. And so you have to think about how that creates your belonging and safety in a place. Oh, so I wanted to highlight that specifically because the AAMC has clear-cut strategies. It's like a great resource that's already there for developing cultures of safety. And I do want to say with the harassment bit, what's really important to make the place safe is good reporting structures and accountability. So I've seen reporting structures fail where it's like, oh, you send in a request, it's supposed to be anonymous, but by the details of the request, the person knows who it is, and then there's been backlash. I've seen this go very poorly. So there are systems from different colleges that you can go and find. I didn't present one that teach a way to do this where you're not necessarily going to the person right after it happens. It's maybe washed away a little bit so you can't tell who it is. And there's tracking of this. So there's a report that happens. We know who that report goes to. We know that we're going to report back to the person who filed the complaint if they choose to, and we know that there's going to be like actually something written down and documented of these trends. I think that's what makes it very difficult to report instances of bias and discrimination, is because more things are subvert, and you have a conversation about it and then it's not tracked, and this continues to make the environment extremely unsafe for marginalized people and leading to attrition. And then meaningful allyship will be my last point, and then I'm going to close out so we have time to chat. But allyship, we talk about it all the time, but a lot of it is performative in a way, both at the institutional level and individually. I don't know how many times one of you guys have spoken up on behalf of something and somebody sends you a text later and like, I totally agree with that. Or they'll email you individually, but they're not willing to sort of step out on the edge. And so a lot of people focus on allyship from the frame of what's positive. Yes, Black Lives Matter, but I'm not going to be anti-racist, right? So people kind of want to draw that line. And so institutions do the same thing. So unless you're willing to have a strategic statement that also condemns racism while also supporting diversity broadly, then it's not meaningful and it's actually more harmful to marginalized people within your institution and can lead to poor attrition. And then I'm going to stop. So we'll just leave my last slide here. This is from the AAMC. It's a great framework about changing looking at everything from within the institutional construct, the structures and policies within our organizations that support and uphold these things, and then individual factors, but just AAMC.
All right. So I'm the closer here. A couple of things that I did before I get into overcoming the barriers, I just wanted to highlight, I can't even see over this thing. I just wanted to highlight what some of my colleagues here, in terms of strategies. So far in this talk, we have videos online by some of the URIM residents, mentoring programs of med students and faculty, med student targeted and focused med student recruitment, DEI visiting student scholarships, community engagement, holistic review of applicants, a safe haven for individuality, compensated roles to eliminate minority tax. And then one of the biggest things is DEI doesn't stop at recruitment, right? So salary audits, equity and promotions, anonymous reporting structures, and meaningful allyship. So these are kind of a lot of the different strategies. I wrote it down on a piece of paper. You can take a picture if you want. But one of the things is you might be at an institution where there are some barriers, right? So even though we have ACGME, AAMC, LCME, all of these, letters telling us that DEI is really important, and even though we have data that it's really important, there may still be some kind of barriers, and that's what I'm going to talk about. And so things that we want to make sure that we do is that we do track data, and there are some proven programs that we can put in to kind of overcoming some of these barriers. So there's implicit bias training. I don't know about all of you, but at my institution, we have to do these kind of like yearly compliance things. And so bias training is part of that. We already talked about mechanisms for reporting and tracking the data, and then actually having an outcomes report. And while this entire talk has really centered on making institutions more equitable, the overall goal and what we're really trying to do here is to change the culture, right? So that's what we're really trying to do. And changing a culture is exceedingly difficult. And that's kind of like the main barrier that a lot of us are up against. And so I wanted to bring these two principles up with all of you that have to really talk about change management. I mean, I just did a workshop 2 days ago, and we did an hour session on change management. So I'm not gonna be able to kind of hit you with everything you need to know in the next 5 minutes, but I did want to share that these two things exist and kind of go into that a little bit. So whenever you're trying to change a culture, most of us in here are probably originators. If you look at the change style indicator, there's 3 different kinds of personalities. There is the pragmatist. Now, the pragmatist is the individual who likes change, but they really want to know what the process is. Like, okay, I'm willing to change, but you really need to take the time with me and go through the whole process and the key steps with me to get me on board. There are the conservers. Conservers don't like change. We all have them. We all have them in our departments, and you can sit there and tell them whatever key points of data and things that you want to tell them, and they are just like, no. And so those individuals, they like baby change, like teeny tiny little baby steps in change. And then there's the originators where, I know some of my colleagues here and some of you, we're the ones who are like, I have this amazing idea and we just want to flip everything upside down and just like do it because it's so great. But the problem is it doesn't work that way, all right? One of the issues may be because we may perceive this as a problem, but other people don't even see it as a problem. We're doing fine. This isn't even an issue. Like, why are we even going into this, right? So that's where the Cotter's 8 steps of change come in. And I'll tell you, if you Google it, you will see all 8 steps. The first 4 are really just kind of getting your team together, right? It's creating a sense of urgency, and you're not going to be able to do that with the entire department. You just are not. You're going to have to focus on a handful of people who are your allies and really get that sense of urgency with them. And then you kind of start to form this powerful coalition. So you're not going in it alone. And this is before you've sent any emails. This is like maybe you had a little side discussion with your chair about, hey, I want to do this. What do you think? And your chair, I think for this topic, most chairs would be relatively supportive. So this isn't like, I told my chair said okay, I've now kind of gotten my coalition together, I have a sense of urgency with them. And then with that group, you kind of create this vision for this change. What would this look like in a step-by-step format? Because you want to get those pragmatists along who really need to see that process. And then you start to communicate the vision with a few more people. And then you empower them. Now is when you can start working on the rest of your department. We are already at like step 5 of the 8 steps. So whenever you're doing change management, it really is in increments. And I will tell you, every single one of us is gonna have the resistors. There are people who, no matter what, are gonna be like, no, we don't need to do this. Don't even focus on them. They may be very, very loud, but those people are on the fringe, and they're the minority of your group. The people that you want to focus on are the maybes. The maybes are the ones to target and spend your time and effort on. Not trying to oversimplify it, this is actually, change management is huge. There are MBA courses and leadership courses where this takes an entire semester to learn. But we are talking here about changing cultures, so it would be remiss of us to not talk about the fact that you have to invest in some change management strategies in order to overcome barriers. And with that, we have 10 minutes for discussion. Yay, we did it. We wanted to make sure we had at least 10 minutes.
So we'll open up to questions. Yeah.
This is great. I have so many questions. I will limit it to one. One thing, I think Josh, you mentioned this, that we have a lot of academic residencies and we might be fighting each other for the same people. So what can we do as a Department of Emergency Medicine to increase people going into medicine so that we're not all fighting for the same several hundred people, and that we're starting from much further back in the educational cycle to help people get to where we're fighting for them?
I mean, even that is a tough thing because now we're stealing from different specialties, right? I would love to have OB-GYN providers be minorities in this. And so I think the big thing is we have to get invested in pipeline programs at an early age. I almost also think this is a great recruitment tool. Any URM who comes here wants to know how they can get involved in a pipeline if you have them coming during the summertime and being involved early. And so really increasing that pool. If any of us can get on an admissions panel for a medical school, that would also help. But I'm torn because even if we recruit more in emergency medicine, we're just pulling from another specialty that has dozens of papers about how they're lacking diversity as well. And so a lot of this is a crux. But one goal I have is that nobody doesn't come into emergency medicine when they think it's the best specialty for them because they're a woman or because they're gay or because they're black, or they don't come to your program when they think it's the best program for them or it's the closest to their family and they don't come because they're worried about that. And so I think it's the higher order goal I have.
Yeah, I'm gonna say. So we, I will tell you, our numbers at Hershey are not great, but we're working on it because it's a work in process. I mean, as Dr. O mentioned, Emory, they started this in 1999. But one of the things that we have started to do are community outreach programs where it's not even focused on med students, it's the actual community, right? So we do this MLK health screening, and we have all of our faculty, URIM, female, men, Caucasian, Latinx. We all participate in this, and we're actually involved in the community. We also have a undergraduate partnership with Penn State University, where some of their senior students, or the juniors and seniors in college, will come and just kind of observe, do kind of like a career exploration type of observation of the various different specialties in our institution. And so that has increased in terms the URIM numbers for the College of Medicine. And so that has been a helpful way to kind of start all the way at the beginning of the stream, right? In order to kind of increase the diversity throughout the entire process.
And then I'll say too that we have a lot of a lot of places like to do their own pathway and or pipeline programs, but at County I don't have a true affiliated med school, and so it's difficult for me to kind of get involved in some of those ways. And then I don't like the one-stop shop, like, come hang out in the Sim Center, and then you go home. So what I did was I found a local nonprofit that actually engages with the kids from high school through college, even into medical school, and providing them supports, because there are systemic barriers. It's very expensive to take the MCAT. It's very expensive to take a preparatory course. And so in addition to us meeting monthly with the kids to expose them to healthcare careers and do history taking, they also provide MCAT testing and just mentorship that's consistent and longitudinal, which is very difficult for us to do with our very busy careers. So I chose to find a local nonprofit to engage with in that way, so that I'm still in the community and I'm not bearing the brunt of it, which tends to happen when you start your own program.
That's a great idea.
Good morning, everybody. So as a Black woman and as a resident, part of recruitment that I think really goes a long way is I know myself and a lot of my friends, we would go and we would count the amount of faces that looked like us in previous classes. We would go through faculty lists and count the amount of faculty that looked like us. So that being said, now being at the end of my residency, going into faculty positions, do you guys have any advice on how to eloquently ask about that transparency of either salary, of retaining faculty? What are they doing through their promotion process? How do you ask for that transparency without coming across as either a it's not necessarily angry Black woman, but us too assertive or to asking too many questions, not staying in my lane kind of thing, because it happens.
I'll try to take a stab. I've seen this go both ways, right? And so Dr. Mabens and I work together, so she knows this, but we actually, when you come in and ask the intentional questions, like how many of your faculty of color are being promoted? How many of your faculty are women? Because we've had people come into interviews in the years that I did interview that have asked those questions. And sometimes people take them very well. Sometimes they're taken aback by them. And sometimes I've had faculty members who have a complete opposite, very negative response. I had a faculty member that was very upset that a transgender candidate asked if the environment was safe for them. So honestly, I think it's reasonable to ask, and if somebody is upset by you asking, then it's probably not, especially at the faculty level, you have more options. You can go somewhere else. I think it's fair to say, are you tracking any metrics and promotions? Are your faculty of color being promoted? And if they're offended by that, then maybe go elsewhere. And maybe they aren't doing that well, but they're early in the process, and they can say, we actually do track this metric, and I think it's a good start. Med students is a little harder because you're trying to get a job. You know what I mean? And for me, I didn't have a ton of interview spots because my step one was poo. So, I had to be mindful, but I think you have more choices.
I don't have better advice, but I want to be the person who's just happy to be there, and so I definitely don't have empowered myself to ask those tough questions, but they're very useful. But I would say once you're more established, for sure, that probably be an easier, more comfortable conversation, but it's hard to advise.
Does anybody ask right out?
I mean, I have, but it's also I have privilege, I'm white, so I can ask that question a little easier. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I have, in our department right now, and I'm in Detroit, and we don't have a lot of Black people within our department, so that is in itself kind of atrocious. But yeah, it should, yeah, it is. But we now have a white man that's leading the discussion and asking those questions because our chair is not doing the things that they need to be doing. So they intentionally took somebody that's not really afraid to be an agitator and had everybody kind of funnel all of their questions into him, who is, using his position of privilege to say, we need to be looking at this, and, somebody that's a little bit more able to have that conversation without the same.
Well, they're passing the mic. I think that's super important because I've found that when women of color are the ones that are consistently speaking up, we get labeled, and then I'm the troublemaker now. And they don't see the flight of all the other people, and so it becomes an internal problem to the person that's complaining and not an institutional problem sometimes.
So I think that in some respects, though, it's very difficult for certain programs to recruit for because we don't have one. And, you know, I don't have anybody on my faculty of color. And every time we've put out national calls, we've put out calls for people we interview every single candidate, which so far has been 2 over the 15 years I've been there. And so it's difficult. I'm in Louisiana. I'm in Shreveport, Louisiana. And so it's difficult because when we find out where those candidates then went, they ended up going to the big city. You know, they ended up in New Orleans, or they ended up in New York or Chicago or Atlanta, you know, and so I'm struggling to get over that hump of, we've done great at recruiting females. I'm 50% female faculty, but getting somebody of color. Thankfully, we have been able to recruit some residents of color despite the fact that we have no faculty of color, but any tips or things you can think of to try to get faculty of color to come someplace that's not represented yet?
I feel my ankle comes from every time I hear those data, I'm like, wait, I got to get promoted. I have to do research. I have to be a faculty. I have to be present. And I feel like a lot of this is I'm putting it on my shoulders and how to do it, but
It is too far from
it's too far from my mouth, sorry. And so I feel like my first gestalt to answer that is I feel a lot of pressure on myself to be, I got to be faculty, I got to get promoted, I got to be, you know, I need to make more money so the data doesn't look bad for Harvard, you know. And, but it's tough. And the other thing is we have to be creative about this because you're probably more common than not, is not everyone's coming from Atlanta, Houston, and DC. And even we had a problem with it, but it definitely helped to have me there, and I used my own existence to really pull in on that.
What is your institution doing? And this is not a department thing, right? This is an institution thing. If it's that, so what's the institution doing?
I don't really know if they're doing much. There's a lot of the other faculties, a lot of the other departments have people of color on their faculty rosters. We just don't happen to. Right now, I'm in a hiring freeze. The only person I can hire is a new PD and to replace me, and we have not had anybody of color. But
Yeah.
I don't know if they're doing anything special or not, because we are one of the few faculties that has this issue.
So two things. One, it's a problem if you're trying to recruit URIM faculty to your institution and you don't even know if the institution has a program or not. So,
Well, I don't know that they do. That's the key. I
Well,
don't
but
think they do.
that's what I'm saying, you have to find out. Because if they do, and you don't know that they do, I mean, that is a really important piece of information for potential candidates. And then the other issue is, if the institution doesn't have some kind of organization level mentoring, support, some kind of program, then one has to be started. Because this is not a you and your department thing at this point, this is going to be an institutional thing.
Two, I think, I don't know if you've ever, not that you've interviewed a ton of people, but have you done any outreach with the ones that you have interviewed to see why they didn't come? Maybe it wasn't a right fit. Maybe what they needed for their growth and development wasn't there. Because I'm from, Louisiana people are snobby. Nobody likes to live in North Louisiana. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's bicyclists.
People don't like to live in North Louisiana.
However, Shreveport is mostly black. And so I think it goes to say that there's potentially something within the institution that's prohibiting people from wanting to come there, because it's not like they're isolated. I'm very wary to go anywhere where I am the only black person within that community, but that's not the case in Shreveport, Louisiana. And so there has to be something. Maybe you're not carving out enough of a niche for them. Maybe there's not opportunities for development. Maybe they don't see themselves there. Maybe there's not intentional recruitment within, some of the bodies that may target people of color. And so there has to be some kind of change and intentionality. Like, are you recruiting through NMA or going, how are you guys targeting faculty of color to come in for interviews?
Well, we haven't been able to target other than, we didn't target specifically NMA for the PD position. We just did a national target. So, but, I guess that's a good thought, that going to NMA specifically.
Hi, my name is Nancy Kwan. I'm the Vice Chair of Emergency Medicine, Long Island Jewish Medical Center. And this is a great talk. Thank you so much. I was going to make a comment to the resident who posed a question, which is, or posed a question or comment, is that I think if you have relevant, important questions, you should ask them. If you're not getting a good response, that's not a place that you want to be at. And I think, and nobody should ever be labeled for asking important and relevant questions. If you ask me, we recruit faculty. If you had asked me those questions, I would welcome them. I would be transparent about what we're doing, what our faculty makeup is. And we've had to do a lot of work in that area because in terms of recruitment, retention, and transparency, the good thing is our service line is very transparent. So everybody has the same salary based upon how many years out, what your role is. It's all through HR and through finance, so there's no secret deals, which existed at the place that before I came to Northwell. And I think that's it's the institution that you want to look at, how they're driving change. And in our own faculty, for example, and this may be other places, I don't even know what the makeup of my faculty is racially, ethnically, or diversity-wise, because that's considered protected information. But we asked for it. So yearly, we made a commitment to ask for that from HR, and it's given to us in aggregate fashion. So unless I specifically ask each faculty member, what do you consider yourself? Or send out a survey, which I'm not allowed to do because it's theoretically allowed to do unless it's vetted by HR. I don't know the makeup for the faculty of what our faculty is, but I think we have to be proactive to find out what that is and where there's room for where we need to recruit to make our faculty more diverse. And we have work to do in our own faculty, but the commitment is there. And then I just wanted to follow up with a question. I'm sorry, I didn't hear everybody's names, but for the one with the doctor with a role in diversity, and recruitment, how that came about, and what is, so that's something I think we would hope to do that we don't have right now. How did that come about, and what was your, what was the compensation, that you felt was fair?
Yeah, so they originally wanted me to be an APD, and I did not love residency level education. I wanted to go the clerkship role, but I did understand the need, and so I carved out a discussion just like that you saw up there at Google Doc of what I would be able to offer. Sorry about that, I'm terrible. But they wanted me to be an APD, and so I didn't want to do that, but I did want to do the work that they asked me to do. And so what they carved out was a quarter of the APD role. So from November through February, I'm functioning effectively as an APD with the amount of time commitment. And so that was how we determined the compensation. Every year they've given me a little extra. Just it's not a ton, but I do feel compensated. And all that was on the go. They gave me a role, and I had to figure out how to do it. They did not micromanage me. They asked me to do a job, and it ended up working out quite well that I could say all the things I did at the end of the day.
To his point, too, my friends of color who've gotten recruited elsewhere and are doing well, that they were all brought in and they were like, what do you want to do and how do we make that work for you? Because if you really want somebody to come and bring maybe their EMS equity work or their recruitment work, you have to figure out what works for them. And I know what failed for me was I came in as an APD and I'm simulation trained, so I was doing EM simulation and I was leading uncompensated DEI work. And I was like, hey, can I get this, maybe the DEI work folded into APD and I can still go to SIM? And I was told, well, you can't do it all and we're not gonna modify our current structure to meet your needs. And so I ended up giving up the APD spot. So now we have no representative APD, and I dropped all the DEI work because it was uncompensated. So I do what I do for myself at a national level, and I just do SIM. And so what that leads to, though, is I'm not being able to develop at my local institution in all the arenas that I can develop in because they all cross-link. So you also have to be willing to change your current structures to meet the needs, because if we're talking about equity, everybody isn't the same. And so if you want us to come in and do the work, you kind of have to bend a little bit.
All right, well, I think that is our time. I appreciate everyone coming in. I love the great discussion. I think we have some contact information here. So my contact information is on the bottom down there. So if you all have any questions, I'll gladly direct you to whoever needs, just so we don't have 15 emails kind of listed up there. Thank you so much for the discussion. Hopefully we can continue this on into the future. Do you have a riddle? No. No? Okay, no riddles. That's